Welcome to the Code 4 Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cindy Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hey there, welcome back to Code 4 Couples. I'm your host, Cindy Doyle, licensed professional counselor and law enforcement spouse, now retired. Today, I have Brent Cartwright on. He is a retired undercover narcotics officer. He retired early after being shot 6 times in the line of duty. But I am also super lucky because Brent's wife, Wesley, who Brent claims is a saint in all of his experiences, joins us today as well. Brent's story is not just about the incident, but also the awareness he had that he became addicted to undercover work and how he hid that from his family. Brent is also releasing a book that sounds like it's going to wind up being a bestseller. It's called Undercover Junkie. Brent and Wesley, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate y'all coming on. I'm excited to get into this and hear the story and how it all impacted y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, super excited. Thank you so much for having us.
I think we're equally excited to have this interview. And I'm telling you, like, the added bonus of having Wesley on here is going to be good. Why don't y'all...
Can you address me as Saint Wesley? I'm just kidding.
Yes, we will adjust that, Saint Wesley, from now on.
I had to get some brownie points. You got to stockpile those things up because eventually you're going to lose them all.
My husband calls it the emotional bank account. You just put it in the bank, right?
For sure.
Exactly. Why don't y'all tell us a little bit about you? What's kind of your family situation? Tell us a little bit about that.
Should I put you on the spot so to make sure you
I know those dates, but I'm going to let you do this. Go ahead. Ladies first.
Okay. Well, we actually just celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary, right? But we've been together. In fact, my dad, after year 7 of dating, uncharacteristically asked Brent, hey, what are your intentions for my daughter? So we've actually been together for approximately 25 years.
So it sounds like y'all have been together the whole entire career, right?
Yeah. We met in college, and then she was a couple years behind me. So I'd already graduated, and I was hanging out, just working, and I was in the National Guard at the time. And right as she graduated college, I got deployed. So I stayed stateside, luckily, and she got to come out to Fort Lewis, Washington, with me after a certain point. But I was 18 months gone, and I came back, and I got into sales thinking that's what I was going to do. I was an MP in the military, and I didn't want to be a cop ever. I mean, I walked out of there like, no more, never again. And then two years later, I was like, hey, babe, I'm talking to my cop buddy, and I think I want to be a cop. She's like, so much for you not liking that work, but it's a little different from the military versus civilian job-wise.
But I was marrying a salesman.
You're not sure what you got into, right? Yeah.
Well, he was a business guy, and I was going to quote you, I'm never going to be a police officer. Never.
Yeah.
And then something shifted.
What was the deal was I got out of having a tribe and a group from the National Guard or my buddies in college. I was in this stupid motorcycle group riding fast on the back roads. And of course, all the adrenaline that came with that. And then I'm in sales where I'm by myself almost nonstop. And it sucked, and there was zero adrenaline. So then I hear my buddy talk about, so Kansas City is like one of the top 10 most violent cities per capita, for violent crime and homicide. So, and I'm hearing about foot chases and car chases every night, getting fights. I'm like, yes, more. I need that. So the adrenaline side of me was hooked, even with a pay cut.
At what point did you decide to go undercover?
It was right about right before the 6-year mark. Yeah, and back in those days, right, we used to get the 5 to 7 years for burnout, and that's where I was. I walked into police work with some really grumpy bear officers who had been 4 and 5 and 6 years on patrol on the overnight shift, and that's what I did the whole time. They're all getting divorces and having, terrible time of it, which, is understandable. I was just getting married when I got on, so I was like, I can't believe you guys are so grumpy. This is the best job ever. Well, I became that grumpy bear. And what I needed was a pivot and a change. And the biggest step up was undercover work, which I sold to Wesley was, this is safer, right? 911, somebody calls and says there's a gun, you have to go. Undercover, if there's a gun, I can just back out and don't have to do the buy. Well, my ego was never going to allow me just to walk away from that. So that was,
Well,
I was wondering what the conversation was like. Hey, let's go undercover.
yeah, I was going to tell you, as I joke about remembering, and I do remember him saying, I'm never going to be a police officer. To be honest with you, I was not surprised in the least. I knew this part, I saw this part, recognized the team member, the brother, the part of my then boyfriend, now husband, that seeks belonging and team and service, because I recognized you very early on as a warrior. And let me define that just in case there's any misconception. As I was thinking about this, because I know sometimes that word has a negative connotation, and my husband and then boyfriend did not and has never gone looking for trouble. But I think that he's almost offended by those that bring it. And so he is motivated to protect and defend the innocent as opposed to going out and looking for conflict. He's not afraid of conflict. He's willing to stand up and use his strength to fight against conflict, but in defense of the innocent. And I recognized this very early on. So there was no, golly gee gosh, this really floored me. But to answer your question, this is how he sold it. I will never forget it because I believed it. I thought, okay, great. And I think I had to tell myself this on repeat because there was that faint red, the flashing red warning light that sometimes my late mother, I swear I'm going to get to my point, but my late mother said the best advice I have ever given you, honey, is to listen to that inner voice. She is always right, but it's so hard because we talk ourselves out of it for whatever reason. Okay.
Women are notorious for that because we don't want to be seen as needy and emotional. And so women commonly talk ourselves out of that. Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of reasons you don't want to offend somebody or you want to
Sure.
support. I could give you 1,000,001 reasons why we sometimes silence that inner voice. But this is what my face looked like. I know listeners can't see my face, but my eyebrows are scrunched. But he sold me this line, babe, bad guys don't want any, drug dealers don't want any trouble. They just want your money and they want to get out of there. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, they're not looking for any trouble. And we had come from 6+ years of people absolutely looking for trouble. So I was like,
yeah,
okay, he's going to play this part. He's going to be in and out and done. And then he's going to come home. And to boot, we're going to have a day shift. And selfishly, Cindy, I mean, having come from dog watch, which is what we call the overnight shift, I was like, yeah, red warning bell, inner self that knows everything. Shut up. We're going on the day shift, baby. I'm okay with this. All right, let's give it a go.
I sold her all the positives, the stuff that I'd experienced. I mean, I got run over by a car twice. I had been in fights over my gun, broke a guy's neck in a fight over my gun, almost got stabbed. Like all these things. I'm like, hey, babe, this is going to be safer because I won't have to deal with that. Turns out, I mean, obviously that and my ego was the dangerous part. And we'll get into the adrenaline, addiction side of it too, which was more dangerous than all of it. So, yeah.
How long did you work undercover?
I did 6 years before I then again got burnt out and I thought I wanted to go to an admin spot. So I took about 8 months of an admin spot and realized that I went cold turkey. I went from this always at a 7 to a 9 on a danger scale to a 2 in the office. And it was, I mean, I was having withdrawals just like a drug user would have with dope. I was getting in trouble in the office. My supervisor was always on to me. I was getting written up. That was the first negative eval I'd ever had in my entire life. So I found one of our most elite squads that we had. We call them the gun squad. It's mixed with the ATF and the best of the best detectives on our entire department. And they needed an undercover. So I was like, I'll take anything. I'll do anything.
I'm your man.
Yeah. So I want to prove I belong. So I'll do everything, all the dangerous stuff. So yeah, so almost 10 years.
What did you notice shift or change in your relationship? How did it impact your relationship?
Well, I think that I was really lucky during Brent's career. I had my own tribe, and that was comprised of many old dear friends, but I also made a lot of police spouses of law enforcement officers. So I had my police wives, friends, and some of those friends were actually coincidentally married to officers. Not, I didn't meet them because of it, but anyhow, I was able to lean on them. The culture of policing in my home became normal. So when Brent was gone for 9, 10, then 11, and then 12 hours, okay, well, so and so's husband is doing the same thing, so I
Right.
guess it's okay. And I made sense. And this is, of course, we used to joke and say it feels like we're single moms. And I'm going to give a moment for all of the brave, badass single moms out there to laugh and say, hold my beer, because I know that that's not true, but it was to make a point. We used to say that all the time. Feels like we're single parents, feels like we're single
Sure.
parents. Brent deserves a lot of credit. Okay. I need to speak for myself. I can't say that I really felt that way. I said it.
Hmm.
I got it. I mean, I could relate to the statement. Brent did a fabulous job when he was home being engaged, but he was also never home. And so that's the
Mm.
first thing that comes to my mind when you say, how did that affect you? I mean, it takes a lot of work to hold a marriage together when you have very few hours together, and they're weird hours because that job demanded a schedule that was all over the place. So there wasn't,
Hmm.
the dinners, and we had small children. I definitely had to learn to be independent, and I learned to find people that I could rely on. And not that I couldn't rely on Brent, but in his absence, which was a lot.
Yeah, we'd go in at like 7. We would drop our oldest off when she was in kindergarten. I'd go in at 7 or 8 in the morning, maybe come home for dinner, and then usually catch a phone call. Hey, we need to come back in. So 8 o'clock at night, and then it'd be till 2 in the morning, and then turn around and do it
Yeah.
again. And so like 6 days on, maybe 1 day off. So like 90
Yeah.
hours was not an unheard of work week. What a lot of people probably do is the same as I did. I was doing my best to shield Wesley from a lot of what I was going through and dealing with, to save her from worrying, if you will. You'll see the air
Hmm.
quotes there if you're watching on the video. We all do it. We think we're saving them from worrying. But honestly, what that was is if Wesley had known exactly what I was doing, I would have to realize and see the mirror reflection when I look at her and tell her, yeah, I just got in a fight over a gun, the guy trying to kill me. And she would give me the look, and I'd realize exactly the threatening situations I was in. But then also she would have absolutely taken my drug away from me. And I would have been right back like I was in the admin spot. And I'm like any other addict, like an alcoholic. I was hiding my bottles by not telling her anything. So I tried to make it as normal, and it wasn't intentional. I tried to make it as normal as possible. And I wanted to be present for my family. But there is a sense of I am hiding this to help her and save her. But it was really a selfish thing on my part. And it's just really what it was. When I go and travel around and talk to conferences, people, they know I got shot 6 times in the line of duty. Our unit was chasing homicide suspects. So within an hour of a homicide happening in Kansas City, we were boots on the ground trying to buy the murder weapon, buy dope from all their associates, and trying to get people to flip. I mean, it was a constant go, go, go. With an average of a homicide every other day in Kansas City, we're always at work. So that was what this incident was chasing after a homicide suspect. But the real true things that all happened were all the stuff that were building up that I was not processing. I never saw a therapist. I never processed anything that happened to me. And actually, I normalized that the things I was going through, I had the strength to handle it. Otherwise, I was too weak, and
Yeah.
I didn't belong. I didn't fit in, because in our division, they made that normal. Like, hey, if you can't handle it, toughen up, get your uniform on, get back out in the field. Well, you don't want to do that.
Absolutely. Right.
So, but so what happened was we were chasing after a homicide suspect. I got, just for quick purposes of it, I got dressed down in my undercover clothes when he went to a motel. He was trying to rent a room. His billboards were all over Kansas City, so people knew we were looking for him. He had murdered
Mm.
an international student who was getting his graduate degree, working his way through college. And so it was a robbery gone bad. And he was a true evil 1% guy. He was Oklahoma's most violent robber, should have been in prison long before I ever ran across him. He got out and came up to Kansas City, and he killed this kid for no reason at all. The kid tried to run out the
Hmm.
back door because he was scared, and he stood over top and executed him. So I end up going to this hotel and trying to rent a room to be able to watch where he was going. So we knew Monday morning, because this was a Sunday, Monday morning, we are going to go get him. We'd been working 6 days with not a day, or 6 months or weeks without a day off. So we had a skeleton crew and it was surveillance only. And I called an audible. I found what I thought was a great time to get him arrested. He was in the manager's office where I actually bumped into him. And it's bulletproof glass. He couldn't go anywhere. So I thought, call in the cavalry. We'll surround the hotel office. And he's stuck there in this 8x10, bulletproof glass cell. We'll wait him out for 3 weeks if we have to. We had some communication issues. My cell phone dropped. And it took quite a while to get the cavalry to come in. By that point, he saw me pacing out by the street, got nervous. So he got to his car. And right as the SWAT team, we had just a 2-person SWAT team. Normally we would come in with like 12 guys. We had 2. So I ran up to help during the stop because things were looking like they were going south. And then the guy that ended up, our bad guy, our suspect, he jumped out of the car with an AK-47 and just lit us up. And so with no gun, no vest, not that would help, he chased me through the parking lot shooting at me. So over 20 times he shot at me and I got hit 6 times. He shot one other cop right there at the scene 4 times. And before we could get engaged and retake over the situation, he jumped in his car and got away. For me, I got shot twice in my left knee, which destroyed my left knee, twice in the right leg, once in the wrist, which was weird. It traveled up my forearm and blew out my elbow. And the other one was the back of my arm, which broke my arm. So I ended up having to get driven to the hospital, tying my own tourniquets on. And even then, like things were, I wasn't processing that this was a bad situation. I remember even laughing and joking with the hospital staff when they were coming in. I was like, I don't want you cutting my clothes off, so I'm taking them off myself so I wouldn't cut them.
You were in shock.
100%.
Right.
100%.
Yes.
So, and then the shock really comes where I know they're going to call Wesley. And I mean, I don't want to jump on her stuff on it, but that was a terrible, that was the first part that brought reality to me when I figure out what's going on with Wesley.
It's like the 2 worlds colliding.
So you knew that he was working something for 6 days straight. You knew something was going on there. And so you get the call and then you said like the 2 worlds collide. How did it collide?
Well, if I could, I was thinking about something while you guys were talking. People always asked me, Cindy, and they meant no harm. Okay, so I wasn't even offended. That's not what I mean. They always asked me, how do you do it? How do you let him do that? God, I don't know how you do that. And various forms of how do you do it? And so the people-pleasing part of my personality felt embarrassed, and I couldn't help it. I know they were just trying to say, wow, that's exciting. That's crazy. This is a really wild story. But the way I translated it in my head was, you shouldn't be letting him do this. If you loved him more, you wouldn't let him do this. I love my husband more than you. I would never let my husband do that. Now, let me be clear. No one ever said that. Okay, but that's what I heard. I believed in the mission. I have always felt like, this sounds so cheesy, but I was a part of the team. I played a different role, but an essential role. And hats off to you for highlighting those of us behind the badge, men and women, the spouses that are the support system, the spouses that are holding it down so that when you, aware of it or not, come home traumatized, you have a stable, and whether it's a spouse or a best friend, we need our people to heal us so that we can survive. And we can survive anything if you have those people. And I'm really proud that I was and am that for Brent. How did I do it? I have always believed in my role on the department, if I could put it that way. I've always believed in my husband's call to duty and responsibility that we alluded to in the beginning of this conversation. I saw that 25 years ago. So again, wasn't surprised when he said, I want to be an officer, but I had to compartmentalize. And sometimes, especially looking back, I mean, hindsight's a son of a gun, and you got to be careful with it. But I had to put things in a box and then take the box and put it on a shelf. I had 2 babies. And actually a brilliant woman, I went to this magnificent presentation for LEO spouses. Turns out that brilliant woman ended up being Dr. Prohaska, our beloved doctor. Didn't know that then, knew nothing about her, and put it all together. She taught me years before I even knew who she was and who she is to us now. In this presentation I attended, we cannot live at level 10. It's not normal. It's not possible. You'll have a heart attack and die. It's just not human. It's not sustainable. So, and you yourself have talked about on your podcast hypervigilance. So that crazy swing and adrenaline, you can do the science part, but I couldn't live up there. I can't live in that. Oh my gosh, I'm constantly horrified. It's possible, but then you would have a heart attack and you can't raise your children and you can't function or make dinner or like have any kind of life for yourself. So I
Absolutely.
had to trust my husband to make good decisions, to do the right thing, and I had to support his purpose. We have always had a marriage based on trust and not control. And so that word, I'm an ELA teacher, so I'm like, the word let is that operative. I don't let him do anything, but I do have some guilt in hindsight. And we've talked about this, and he put this in the book, like, would I have pulled the plug, Cindy? I don't know, and it's impossible to answer, so please don't even ask me. I don't know what I would have done if I knew then what I know now. The fact remains that I didn't. I knew some, okay, I didn't. It's not like I knew nothing. I certainly didn't think he was going to work and drawing puppies and rainbows in a coloring book, but I had to trust him. This was his calling, so I let him. But that day, I questioned, well, maybe not that day, but once the dust settled and I looked back, and to this day, sometimes I have to put it away. I question, to be honest with you, like sometimes I think, what were we thinking? We had two little kids at home. Brent said, kind of tongue in cheek, but we are literally living the dream. There are some silver linings in trauma. If you let them in, I can speak for both of us. I think our perspective and our priorities have become laser focused. I mean, an ordinary day is a damn good day. Life is really not that exciting 98% of the time, but there's beauty in everything. And my best friend and I always talk about, like, look for those little moments, the sunset, when you laughed heartily with your friend. Those are good moments. Those are good days. This is the stuff of life. So I've taken that from it. But that day, the floor opened and I fell through it. The first call I got was from one of my best girlfriends. Because we have cell phones, I saw her name and I answered the phone and I said, "You turd, I went to that party last night mostly because I was hoping to see you, but you didn't show up." And she says, "Oh my God, you don't know." And my heart dropped. Like, I remember, I can tell you that my hands were on the sink. I remember the look of that sink in our first home. I remember that I was touching it. And I said, "Say it fast, just say it fast," because I thought something had happened to one of our mutual friends' children. I don't know why. That's what I thought. And I actually don't know what she said after that. I can't remember I think she did say something's happened to Brent. And at that very moment, call waiting beeps in. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew that it was somebody from the police department. And I looked at my daughters who were in the living room and I walked out onto our porch because I knew that I was about to, get some information that required privacy. And I answered the phone as I shut the glass door, and it was Brent's friend. I didn't know him then, and I don't remember what he said, but he was explaining. No, I do remember. He said, "Wesley, he's fine. Brent, he's joking with the nurses, yucking it up, ha. But he's been hurt. We're coming to get you." And I was saying, "What happened? What happened?" And he wouldn't tell me. And I don't remember what he said, but he wouldn't answer the question. And I remember feeling indignant. And I had this like really angry, resentful reaction for a split second. Like, who do you think you are? This is my husband. I'm not mad at him at all. He did his very best. And I'll tell you something else I remember vividly is his voice shaking. And these are like macho guys, right? And I could hear the fear in his voice. Looking back, I don't think I was thinking it in the moment, but I do remember thinking, he's scared. And I said, what happened? What happened? And he said, we'll explain, but he's okay. He's okay. We're coming to get you. And I think he hung up. And at that moment, I had the phone in my left hand. I'm telling you, some of these memories are so vivid. It was a really nice day. There were scrambled eggs and blueberries on the table. We had these little toddler plates. And at that moment, my friend who called me, who happened to live a couple of blocks away, had come screaming over in her car. And she ran up the back steps as this phone call drops. And I see her running up the back porch stairs in her socks. And with the phone in my hand, she grabbed my wrists. And I remember thinking, that's weird. Like, she didn't hug me. She grabbed my wrists and I'm screaming, what happened? At that point, your brain, I've had a therapist tell me, like, your brain takes in so much information and your brain knows things that you can't articulate yet. You're nodding like, okay, this is true science. And she said, he's been shot. And I screamed. And I remember I screamed so loud. I had another girlfriend who lived around the corner, and she heard me scream. She later told me, and she asked her husband, did you hear that? And he was like, yeah, I think it was the TV. She might have had like her screen open or something. She had just seen on her phone what do you call it?
Like the ticker symbol came, the local news started putting out officer shot in Kansas City.
She had seen that within like 90 seconds of hearing this scream.
Your scream.
And she said, oh my God, Wesley, I thought of you because I was still thinking about Brent. I heard somebody scream, and again, the brain connects real fast. Wesley lives a block away. Oh my God, was that Wesley screaming? And she was like, I just want to smack myself. I didn't call you. I should have done this and I should have done that. My girlfriend had terrible guilt about being the first one to tell me. And I was like, no, we should be so lucky that our best girlfriends show up, grab us by the wrist. She was holding me, like I dropped in front of her, and I remember she still had me by the wrists, and she was shaking violently. And I remember her eyes were wild, and I remember she was shaking. And I've never before or since seen this woman shake. And it was alarming. It's like seeing your husband cry. I mean, maybe if your husband isn't typically a crier, it's unnerving. It was 11 o'clock on the weekend. My girls were probably watching cartoons. We had just made this big breakfast, and I was reading The Last Mrs. Parrish. I'll never forget it. I had just wrapped the book, and I took a selfie 30 seconds before that call of my dog, like smothering me. You know, she was laying on my chest, and I thought it was really cute. And so I took this picture, and I was holding the book. And like, speaking of two worlds colliding, the juxtaposition between like what happened then and 10 seconds later, it messes with you. Sometimes you think, God, I hope nothing bad happens at the end of today, you know?
Yeah. Oof.
Anyway, thanks for.
I want to go back and say something. You had said, how do we let them do what they do? And you said a couple of different things that I just want to point out to everybody. You said, first of all, I trusted. You knew he was this warrior. He was motivated. So you honored who he was and he trusted it. And you knew the sense of service. You were serving alongside of him. You were proud to serve alongside of him. And I also think that as we go along in our career with them, that it just normalizes, like that's what he does. We don't think about all the dangers, because if we thought about all the dangers, we'd be basket cases. Right.
Exactly.
And so like as much as your job as an officer is to what if all of the dangers to make sure that you come home in one piece, many times as spouses, it's like, I can't what if. I just trust you to come home. And that is the way you do it. And so you didn't let him. It was a part of what you did, right? You served alongside of him. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit, if I can. I'm guessing the recovery from the incident is where you kind of recognize that there was a purpose in hiding things from Wesley. And at the same time, maybe there was something underneath that. How did you develop that awareness of like, oh my gosh, I was going after this and the negative impacts of it?
Yeah, I initially got, when being in the hospital that first night, I was like, so much shame and so much guilt. right?
Mm.
I called the audible. I was responsible for the shooting. Mike got shot because of me. The bad guy got away, holed up in an abandoned
Oof.
house, and for an hour and a half had a shootout with cops. And my brothers and sisters, another officer got shot there. So, thankfully none of us died. Bad guy did eventually get shot and got killed. But the whole responsibility pie was all mine. I got
All
every
on you.
piece. Yep.
Mm.
The guy that shot me, nope, not responsible. It was all me. So
Hmm.
a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of
A
blame.
lot of
And so,
coulda, shoulda, wouldas.
oh yeah, a lot of what ifs. So when I finally got out of the hospital is when I got to do the final debrief of the situation, because we had 300 and some odd officers be on the scene at during the whole thing. And I do this debrief, and I was like a slobbering, screaming, cussing mess. Like the F-bomb was like every third word.
Hmm.
And I remember looking around and everybody kind of looking at me nervously. And part of it is I was still trying to comprehend how I had lost control, and I was trying to grasp to get control back of the situation. I mean, that situation taught me that it was the first time ever I didn't have control. And when you're an officer and you don't have control, that's a shitty day. Like when you realize like you
Absolutely.
actually never had control the whole time,
Hmm.
that's even
Hmm.
worse.
That's a mind F.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we had a therapist from the department, obviously helping to do the debrief, and that therapist was probably under equipped to be able to deal with especially the stuff that I had been going through, but that's who they had hired. So
Hmm.
I had started doing therapy, and I had different really strong badasses from our department come and visit me every day and tell me like, hey man, you need to talk this out. And I thought I was. I mean, the therapist I had, really nice person, but it was more like the paid best friend type therapist. I was going in
Mm.
and bitching and complaining. They were telling me, I understand why you're bitching and complaining. I would too, but there was no purpose behind the actual treatment. So, but I thought I was doing everything okay. I'd never seen a therapist. I didn't feel any better. I wasn't sleeping. I was having crazy nightmares that were so realistic. I thought they were real. And I would wake
Hmm.
up, and it turns out I was having like nightmares inside of nightmares inside of nightmares. So I'd wake up 6 times a night, but each one was a different dream. And I never knew when reality was. So when my little poor kid comes into the bedroom after having her own nightmare and waking me up, I'm thinking I'm being attacked. And there's this, I'm like, okay, well, it's just another dream. I just keep getting killed in all my dreams. I'm like, this is just another dream. I knew I wasn't well. And I had gotten well enough that with some really creative HR work from some really scandalous people in our department, they sent me back to work with physical limitations, with really struggling mentally. I mean, drinking started picking up and ramping up. I was hiding it from Wesley. I would bring a flask to work and drink it on the way home. And I would have a Yeti cup so that you couldn't see how
Mm.
strong and how much my drinks were. And I went back to work for almost 2 years, and every day was the worst day of my life going to work. And I finally did the hardest thing ever. I sat and cried, and I talked to Wesley and I said, babe, I can't do it anymore. And I had to reach out to that therapist who I'd still been seeing and said, I can't do it anymore. And he said, dude, I was never going to pull the plug for you. I was going to wait for you to call it. I can't believe you lasted this long. And
Mm.
so they immediately pulled me from duty. And the chief of police now was the major of HR then. So she called me and she said, Brent, what the hell's going on? I said, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm either you're going to retire me or I'm going to quit. I can't do it anymore. I'm like, and I started telling her, she's like, yeah, I'm reading these notes. And like this, I had no clue.
Mm.
And so she said, hey, I'm going to get you better. Stay home. I'm going to make it a point to get you better. I got better medical treatment for my leg, which was still, dealing with really bad nerve issues and a lot of mobility issues. And she got me with Dr. Prohaska, who's my therapist. And things started changing, right? You get a therapist that specializes in first responders and can understand and get it. And we had a trust issue. I mean, I sat down and I was like, you work for the department who's already wronged me. I
Right.
hate you. I hate you. You're a piece of crap. And she's like, I understand why you hate me. And you're a piece of crap.
And that's okay.
We had a cool come to Jesus meeting, and it took me about 6 months to trust her. I really started getting to, and that's where I can start seeing stuff that in the past, okay, it wasn't just getting shot and, some guy trying to execute me in this motel parking lot. There was all these things that I was doing and hiding. and suppressing that. It really came out like, man, I wish I'd have done a lot of this stuff sooner instead of just bearing it down, because getting shot, yeah, that was a bad day and that was really bad for a lot of stuff. It's what saved my life. Had I
Right.
continued to go down the path that I was going, if I'd have made it out of that one without, getting myself shot, I was going to do something even more dangerous and dumber and dumber until eventually it got me killed. And I just didn't even recognize it. So
Yeah.
if you read the book, there's a really crazy chapter where I'm in the middle of a knife and a gunfight. And I've actually got the air tapes or my listening device tapes from it. You can hear me laughing. Like two guys are trying to kill each other, and I'm between them. One guy trying to shoot the other trying to stab me, and I walk out of there laughing. To register how bad you've lose yourself in your environment, and to say what should be a 10 on a like oh shit scale, like everybody's about to die. I registered it like a 3 or a 4, and that's how just destructive
How
that you can
skewed
get.
things were.
Oh yeah.
Wesley, I'm curious about when you found out that these things had been hidden. Did it shift your relationship, or did you have to rewrite some of what you knew about your life together or beliefs about his career or him?
Sometimes I feel like when I'll speak for myself, when I talk, I don't want to give the impression that I regret his career at all, or I look back and I'm not proud of it. That's not true.
Yeah.
I will admit that sometimes I think to myself, should we have been doing that? I'm just being honest. Those are honest thoughts. But at the end of the day, I'm still very, very proud of him. I'm not mad, I guess. If you're asking me, like, am I angry that he hid
No.
those things from me? No, I'm not. And plus, like I said before, I did know a lot of stuff. I think that Brent strategically withheld poignant moments, pivotal moments, crucial moments, but he would tell me, my best girlfriend and I were talking about this. She was like, we would talk about, she's been reading the book, and we would talk about these events, Wesley. I kind of remember this, but we didn't know that. That's how I lived. I knew about this incident, but I didn't know that. And that was a big deal. That came out. I also think that maybe Brent had been hiding that from himself and not telling me. He wouldn't have to address it in his real life, because I am his real life. I mean, it's all your real life, okay? I'm not saying like the officer in you is phony or fake, but I'm the core, if you will. His daughters are his core.
I
What do you
think
think?
also what you're trying to say too is, and I'm going to tie both of those together. So, Brent, you were saying something that should register, should have registered a 10 in your brain was a 3. So if that's your mentality, if you're going in of like this, it was a 3, I can understand why you're like, oh, well, it's Wesley, that was a 3. Why would I tell Wesley about a 3? Right. But maybe part of what you're saying, Wesley, is that reflection, that mirror of, if I would have come home and told her that, she would have been, that's a 10, honey. That's a 10. Why aren't you
Exactly.
seeing that as a 10? This is a problem. And I think that's part of what you're saying. And I think part of what you're saying too, Wesley, is it's like you trusted him because there's things like, I don't need to know everything. You're doing this. He did this because he loves me, that he didn't want to expose me to everything. But once again, if something's a 3, I don't know that I'm going to run home and tell. Right.
Yeah. And if I didn't, so if I didn't tell her too, though, I didn't have to really look at like, oh crap, because I still have to go do this job. So if I start realizing the full danger of everything I'm doing, then I'm not able to do it, which then really is an ego hit, because we all have a big ego. And then like when I did tell them some of the stuff and glossed over, I mean, that was totally depersonalization. I tell it like I was in a movie and I wasn't really a part of it. So it really wasn't affecting me. And that was a good way to shovel that shit down into the hole and not really address it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and you were providing for a family, so I'm sure there was a part of you that was like, I have to get up and go do this again. So I have to figure out, I talked about putting your career, in so many words, in a box and on a shelf so that I could take care of our daughters. You probably had to do that too, so that you could get up and do it again the next day. And in addition to that, if your shelf stayed at work, that environment, if you will, if we could keep this metaphor alive for a second, that closet, if you kept it in the closet at work, that closet has a lot of boxes on that shelf because they're all doing that. And so it's,
Yeah.
to bring that word back, it's more normal. And if he keeps it over there, it's normal, it's more acceptable, it's the way it was. Not only that, but Brent was getting a lot of attention for his perceived bravery and definite, it was bravery. But sometimes we look back and the word reckless weaves its way into the story. It intertwines with bravery.
Yes.
But and it was kind of exciting. So he was getting some attention because the stories were crazy. And, at the end of the day, everybody likes a good story. And so, and all of these other officers have crazy stories too. And so they'd swap the crazy stories. And here we go again. It's normal again. I don't think I answered your question at all. But how did
It's
it affect
fine.
our relationship? You know what? In the end, it brought us closer together. I'm not sure if that's what you thought I was going to say, but that
Not
is
in the
the
moment,
answer.
but eventually.
Eventually, because I don't
What
know if
about
you
in the
remember
moment?
this.
Tell me about in the moment.
I would think, but we had some talks about it where maybe she's not remembering. I mean, she felt kind of like betrayed. Like I told some other people, but didn't tell her.
Oh,
all
I
the
guess I do
details.
remember that.
I would tell my friends and I'd be like, hey, Wayne, I'm going to tell you something that happened today. It's crazy as shit, but make sure you don't tell your wife, who will eventually tell Wesley. And like, you guys can't tell Wesley this. And I would tell the stories. So then she was like, how could you leave me out of all this? And it was, again, I mean, it was my selfishness to be able to keep doing this job. It wasn't a shot at her. I knew she's strong, she could handle it, but man, would she allow me to keep doing it? I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to answer that one.
I do
Right.
remember feeling jealous of that shared intimacy because if I could put my finger on it, like, why would that upset me? Because a part of me really loves the protector in you. You didn't have any malice in your heart when you kept things from me. Kind of similar to how your dear friend who called me and told me, you're okay, but you're hurt and we're coming to get you. Him not disclosing to me pissed me off. He's mine. He doesn't belong to you. I know the things. You don't know the things. So tell me the things and then I'll tell you what to think of them, buddy. That's what I was thinking about. Because I do remember that. I didn't like other people having knowledge of really important aspects of your life that you should be debriefing me on, talking it out with me. I love your friends. They're my friends too. But that belongs to me first. You first, me second, everybody else third. You would say, I think I'm ready to tell you something tonight when we walk. We started walking together. We didn't always used to, but that happened after the shooting. And that's when you would disclose stuff to me. Do you remember that? You would be
Well, I
like,
was writing the book, but I was writing it by hand. I wrote every chapter by hand because you had to slow down. I hope everybody does this. You have to slow
Good
down.
narrative therapy there.
Very, yeah, but you got to be ready for it. But I wrote it and then I rewrote it. And then finally I was like, hey, babe, I think we're going to make this into a book. Like this. Not only is it's not a book about war stories. I mean, there's purpose and meaning behind it, but she's like, well, I want to know like all of the intimate details of these stories that you're writing out. And some of them were hard to get out. I mean, they were like, yeah, babe, I'll tell you on the next walk. Or I'll tell you on the next walk.
That's true.
I'll tell you on the next one. Because, and again, I didn't want to relive a lot of this stuff either. I mean, I was reliving it, writing it. It was really emotionally heavy. I can't remember for a decade or better that I had ever cried. And then the shooting happened. I didn't cry until I got home. And it was because I expected I shouldn't be at the house. Like I should be dead. So it felt weird to be in my home. I felt really uncomfortable and nervous. Like this is not it felt really strange and odd. So bringing up the stuff to tell her, man, it started bringing all these emotions that I'd suppressed. And I was like, yeah, this sucks. This feels like shit. I don't want to tell you this.
Yeah,
And it's not because I don't want to tell you. I just don't want to feel like crap. So
I'm just watching y'all's relationship. And I'm wondering too, if part of it is the intimacy in telling someone that you love so dearly and you've walked this life with, which is different than telling someone that is just hearing the story. This is somebody who could be impacted, and it's a different type of sharing when you think about like just telling the story to your
At the
friend
bar
versus
when
like,
you're
Totally. Totally.
oh gosh, I have to tell you this. And I know you're going to have an emotional reaction. And I think about it from your perspective now. And I think about what could have, should have, or possibly could have been. Wesley, I think you said something about the relationships. And that is a big part of healing that our officers need those relationships because it helps them become more resilient. They need that safe home life. And I think y'all are living it in a way that it's come around. I love the fact that you were like, I don't really remember, which tells me things are so good, right? But Brent's like, oh, I do. I do. I'll tell you why. Let me tell you what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Maybe you're right. Maybe because what I said isn't untrue, but when you reminded me, I do remember feeling jealous, resentful.
mhm.
And I remember us having fights like, that's what you said. You've been telling me that for 2 weeks. What are you talking about? And it was uncomfortable. It felt, I don't know, I didn't know what you were going to tell me. And that's annoying, frustrating, frightening.
I've got a
Like, what?
secret, but now I'm not going to tell you for a
Right.
week. Like, oh, come on, you got to tell me it now.
And like, what the hell are you going to say? Like, what has happened to
Ugh,
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
that's the
really
worst.
unsettling. But you're right. Maybe I'm picking and choosing out of survival to remember.
Keep picking the positives, babe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, I think, the thing is that when we heal from those things, it doesn't, it, that's a positive thing that I'm having to be, that you're reminded of like, hey, no, you did feel these things. So what that tells me is that you're a resilient couple, right? So when we
Thanks.
look also at like post-traumatic injury or, PTSD kind of aspect, we're looking at growth too. So growth
Totally.
and resilience is the positive aspect of what comes out of this. And y'all are not only sharing the idea of this is what we went through. I'd like to let everybody hear what was the messy middle, what was the part, what was the storm, and not just where you got to, right? And so there is a
Sure.
storm there, but there's also, hey, we are in a very different place and we're here to share our story. I love the reflection aspect that y'all have said a couple of times of like reflecting to each other and saying like, oh, if I was to share that, I would see it through a different perspective or different eyes. So
I feel
I
like
like it.
for us, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you said the storm, in this situation, in our home, in our marriage, the storm was very personal for Brent. And for many couples, I know that it can mean butting heads, more fights. And that did happen after my mom died. So I can see how like intense trauma we reflected on that. Like, man, I'm not saying, oh, we never fight. Of course we fight, but we've never fought like that.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, everything was just so upsetting. After the shooting, that didn't happen to us necessarily, but I remember feeling like what might have been a shared storm, you just absorbed all of that darkness.
Mm,
And I felt, my torture was watching you suffer and feeling helpless. It wasn't
mm,
necessarily that it manifested for us as we fought. That has happened. I know that can.
mm-hmm.
That didn't happen in our case, but he fought himself, and I watched him
Yeah.
fight himself for a long time.
Because then you wind up feeling helpless and it's like, I
Yeah.
can't, you can only support, but it's ultimately, it's up to the person that's fighting that battle to forgive themselves and to move through it.
Well, and that was one of the big things, like for the longest time, like Dr. Prask even asked me, she said, Brent, do you think you can get better? And I was like, the true answer is I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have the mindset of I know I can get better.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one of the things I saw the other day was Lieutenant Redmond, the Navy SEAL guy, this note that he put on his hospital door. He's like, if you're going to come in here, don't come in here feeling sorry for me and my injuries. That's not the attitude here. I'm a warrior and I'm going to move on and do better. I didn't have that mentality then. And it takes a lot to get it. It's hard to have that. That's a really strong person that has that mentality, but everybody can get it and everybody can have that mentality. It's sometimes when you're in the pit of the shitstorm that you're in, it's a very difficult thing to see. But if you actually have the strength to say, I know that I can get better, you can do the work and do it. the work sucks. I'm not gonna lie, man, that work
No, the work
sucks.
sucks.
You guys, God
Very
bless
much
you
so.
guys and women that put up with us to help, putting Humpty back together again, because I know I created a lot of headaches, not even for Wesley, but for my therapist and everybody. But it sucked for me too. It's not easy.
Yeah.
If it was easy, it would be quick and painless and out the door. It took me years to unravel, and I'm still dealing with it. I mean, it is what it is.
So tell us a little bit about Undercover Junkie. And obviously, there's going to be some stories in there, but I think that you're saying there's also some points that you wanted to get across to people who read it. Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, the book isn't just a bunch of war stories. I mean, obviously, police officers and first responders, military, we have more than you could ever write, 10 million books about. And so there are war stories in there, but they come with a point and a purpose. Each one has a reason why. And a lot of them I go is subtle so that you can get it as a reader. Nobody wants to be preached to. So, but there are points that everybody should get. I think spouses will understand it when you get it. Other officers, new officers, other first responders, you don't just have to work undercover to see it. So to realize that how much our environment can change us, because that's what ultimately was happening to me. I actually started beginning to really adapt and be more comfortable around all the dope dealers and the drug users than I was even at home. And if you're on patrol, you start getting more and more used to that and the chaos than you are at the silence at home. You can get bored at home and like, okay, this sucks. So I want to go do something to get some excitement. I can't stand here at the house. This is when fights start. It brings a lot of those details of the self-awareness and the self-regulation, all the things that are important to check and see. I go back to some of my early past, like before I met Wesley, so you can understand like what kind of a person I really am. And I bring you through the whole journey of my career with some exciting stories for sure. But that way you can see what it looks like when someone's losing themselves and what's all happened and some of the science behind the why, because we're fact finders. We want to know why the hell is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my spouse? So, which is great. Why I love your show is because people can listen to it and kind of get a why. And then maybe, hopefully, if they're struggling, they can seek the help, because just with my book, if you don't know you need help, you'll never get it. I needed help and never knew it. Nobody checked me. I needed somebody to save me from myself and all my undercover career. But if you'd have come to me and said, Brent, hey, and you're starting to take some risk and starting to, these are what I'm seeing from you, I'd have been like, yeah, go pound sand. I'm at the time, I was the longest tenured undercover in the history of our department. And so like, you're going to tell me I'm messing up? Yeah, I'm getting all the stats, go after yourself, because I got this,
Right.
Leave me alone. But so like my conferences, when I speak, I get 60, 80, 100 people come up or email and call me and say, hey, I see myself in your story. Oh my gosh. Or that's totally the guy I work with. Or this is my subordinate. Oh my gosh. Now when people are seeing it, they understand what it looks like. And that's the whole purpose of this. I'm not just trying to tell my stories. I tell those enough to my friends. I don't get anything out of that anymore. So I'm telling it with a purpose to help and bring awareness to it all. So that's really where it was all born of.
I love that. And us being able to see ourselves in somebody else's story helps us to go, oh shit, maybe there's something there, right? I love that you're using that to help change other officers' lives. And you're so right about the mental health aspect. It's like we could talk about mental health all day long, but until we start talking about our own struggles and, hey, I was you, and here's how you do this, or here's how I figured it out. And until people can identify that, then we're not really changing anything about mental health. So I love that you're utilizing those stories for a greater good. And in a way, I'm going to tap into something Wesley said about you at the beginning, which was that you're a warrior and you're just moving that warrior into a different direction, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be an idiot if I didn't say there is shame about having to say you're struggling. That is a huge problem we have. I had it too. I had that same misconception when somebody said, I'm struggling. I was quick to ridicule people. And until you're actually in the shit and the hole, you don't realize exactly what that feels like. And once you're there, you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. So to bring a little bit of the stigma away from, well, I need to see the therapist, or I'm feeling shitty, instead of just holding on to that, and let people should know, like, hey, if you're going to challenge my man card, I challenge you. I've done some pretty crazy things and pretty strong things. And to say that I'm broken, same with like Tom Satterley, the 25-year U.S. Special Forces guy. He's saying, hey, I struggle. And if big warriors can say we struggle and I need help.
Absolutely.
And people like you, therapists, guess what? You guys go and see other therapists because you have to unload. You have to unload. And there shouldn't be shame with it.
And we struggle saying that we need help too. In our law enforcement family, strength looks like I can handle this. I can deal with this. But really, strength is also saying this is hard and it's okay if I need some help every now and then. So I can go back and do the thing.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. On your website, there is a way to get a challenge coin, but I couldn't figure out how to get the information to get it. And that challenge coin looks pretty freaking badass.
It's cool.
And I want one.
I'm glad you brought it, because I was going to say that.
How do people get a challenge coin? And because I know they're going to want the coin and the book.
Yeah, so that is the deal. If you buy the book, send me an email and say, and like it could just be the receipt number. There's a link to the book on the website, undercovered.net, or you can go to it's on Amazon.
And it's in the show notes. So if you're on your device, just drop down and it's right there and click the link.
You can see the coin on my website. It's really cool. It's from my UC days. It got outlawed by our department. So I took the department stuff, right? A dope unit can't have too many pictures of dope, apparently. So I'm retired. It doesn't have department stuff on it now, but it's still the same coin. So yeah, I can hand this out. If you buy the book, I'll send you the coin. Just send me a quick email. You can find that on my website, or it's brent@undercovered.net. Show me that you bought the book. I'll send you the coin free of charge. Normally, I only hand these out in person. I take pride of not making it a commercialized thing. I don't let you buy the coin from me. Normally, you have to see me in person. I want it to be, privileged to get it. But if you buy the book, you're going to hear my story. That's just the same as hearing me speak at a speaking conference. So thanks for supporting this, and I'll send you the coin. Yeah. And you're going to get one for sure.
I'm buying the book. So if you need that website again, it's undercovered.net. But like I said, if you're on your device, just drop down into the show notes and you can click that link there and keep up with Brent and what he is doing, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be hitting some big speaking circuits soon. I'm sure like if your department wants to bring him in or your organization, he would love to come and do that. Wesley, any words of wisdom that you would like to share with us before we go?
Find your own tribe. Lean hard on them. But I think that it all boils down to communication. Don't give up, because that communicating seems so easy, and it is at face value, but sometimes it can take years to say the things you need to say. So be patient, stay together, stick with each other, and be a good listener, because and maybe brace yourself.
Brace yourself and make home a safe place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
Sure.
Guys, if you like this, just give me a follow or a like. You can do that on your device. Also, just a reminder that I do have that 14-day appreciation challenge out, and you can get that by going to code4couples.com/appreciation. And I don't do things that take a lot of time. So you could do this appreciation challenge. It takes a whopping 5 minutes a day for 14 days, and you're going to put all kinds of credit in your emotional bank account with your partner. So keep that in mind. Wesley and Brent, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to have y'all on. And until next time, guys, y'all keep it Code 4. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cindy, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.